Joining us, though, praise be to Jesus, is Jason Jones. He is the founder of the Movie to Movement, but also the Vulnerable People Project. We've had him on several times to talk about his incredible work. Good morning to you, Jason Jones.
Good morning, sir.
Praise be to God. Thanks for being on with us today. We're very grateful to you. You've been busy. You're a busy guy, man. I would just like to be a fly on the wall in the Uber that takes you around because you're all over the place doing some incredible stuff. Tell me what's going on in Ukraine with the Vulnerable People Project.
Well, going back to August, we began evacuating Christians and American citizens and others from Afghanistan, and we've gotten quite a bit of publicity from our work. And when Russia began to invade Ukraine, we began to get inundated from Ukrainians asking us to help evacuate them from the Ukraine. So for the past 2 weeks now, we've been drinking from two fire hoses. Afghanistan is still a catastrophe, and we're moving people out of Afghanistan every day, and we've delivered over 50,000 families 4 months of food and coal from Afghanistan. But we're also now evacuating women, children, and the elderly from Ukraine. We've evacuated over 5,000 people in less than 2 weeks, including a school for the blind, several orphanages. And in the early days, what we did is we sent buses to all the hospitals and began to just bus people that were in the hospitals across the border to Poland.
Wow, that's incredible. Are the roads still passable? What is that condition like? I mean, I've heard reports that some rail lines have been bombed and they are using buses and there's some corridors. So what's the situation when it comes to actual conflict and the potential of these people being harmed and trying to get out of the country?
It's very dangerous, as it is in Afghanistan. We had one of our volunteers. We have over 100 volunteers, most of them Ukrainian, but also Poles, and even a volunteer from Ireland. We had a volunteer shot in the leg about 4 days ago. He's going to be okay. But yeah, no, it is very dangerous. And as someone said, for us, it feels as if World War III has already started. You brought up being a fly on the wall in an Uber. It's interesting you would say that. About a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was on the phone in an Uber and talking to my Afghan ground team. And the Uber driver, when we got to my destination, he said, "Excuse me, sir, I hope you don't mind me asking, are you rescuing people from Afghanistan?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, I was a translator for the United States, for the Army. I'm Afghan, and I have a brother who is a translator, and he's an SIV. He has SIV status, but he's still stuck in Afghanistan. You couldn't help us. You think you could help us? I said, "Of course I can." And so we were able to, within a week after me being in this young man's Uber, we were able to rescue his brother.
Wow. Praise be to God. That's incredible.
Wow, Jason, that's such a cool story. Providence right there, right? I mean, you ran into him for a reason. I'm wondering if you could describe, we're getting a lot of news about the shelling, we're getting news about military movements and that sort of thing, but one thing that I think is lacking is the experience of the people. What is the common experience of the people in Ukraine fleeing the war?
I mean, I guess it's hard for us to even begin to understand what it would be like to have to flee your village, your town, your neighborhood, with all of your family, with all of your friends, and then to know that your city was being destroyed, while the young men are staying back and fighting one of the most powerful land forces in the history of the world. It's quite frightening, and my heart breaks not only for the Ukrainians but for these Russian boys who are being ground into. They're over 1,000. 2 days ago, I think the Russians lost 1,000 casualties. There was 1,000 casualties in one day. This is really an unnecessary war. It's utterly unbelievable. I don't see that. I see this is really Ukraine is in a proxy. It's NATO and Russia are using Ukraine. Both want Ukraine as a buffer from the other, and so the poor people of Ukraine are being ground down. Their country's being trampled because NATO's insistence on pushing up against the Russian border for 30 years. We've been increasingly aggressive towards Russia. and then Putin foolishly launches an immoral and illegal war. So I don't see really, the only white hats I see are the Ukrainians. And I would like to see statesmen in the West rise to the occasion. I have no hope for Putin, doing the right thing, but putting the interests of the Ukrainian people first. If this is about Ukraine's, if we insist on if we really wanted Ukraine in NATO for the interest of the Ukrainian people, we're not demonstrating it now as we're watching Ukraine be crushed.
We're talking with Jason Jones from the Vulnerable People Project, and we encourage everybody to check out their website and maybe even contribute in order to provide for this relief effort, thegreatcampaign.org. That's thegreatcampaign.org. Jason, it really is the biggest trick, I think, in this conflict is to try to sort fact from fiction here. Okay, can you just give me some insider baseball on your rescue effort? How do you know who to work with over there? How do you know how to pick the team, put the right people together, get the right resources? How do you find buses in the midst of the largest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II? How are you able to do all of that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's very challenging. In fact, it's equally as challenging in Ukraine as it was in Afghanistan. You might think Ukraine would be easier, but in many ways it's very complex, and it's when I founded my organization Hero with its two programs, the Vulnerable People Project and Movie to Movement, over 20 years ago, I had been in the Army, and then I went to the University of Hawaii. And I thought, imagine if you could found a nonprofit sort of modeled on the Special Forces aid team model, where you would work with local communities to advance the interests of the vulnerable, from the child in the womb to vulnerable ethnic and religious minorities facing genocide. So that was sort of our model, and that's how we work. So we have trusted partners in Ukraine. In fact, the director of my Ukrainian ground team, she is our liaison with all of our different teams on the ground in Ukraine, is Irina Skaya, and she is a famous Ukrainian comedian. She was going to be touring with Louis C.K. of all people, right? That's someone I'd think to and I would listen to. So she was supposed to be touring with Louis C.K. across Ukraine this week. So Irina is well known, but it's funny. We sent a team of Americans, combat medic veterans, into Ukraine. We purchased an ambulance, so we own several buses, 30 cars.
Wow.
And the buses and cars, we're buying another 3 buses this week. Our goal is to buy another $200,000 in vehicles in the next 10 days. But we bought an ambulance in Poland, and we're staffing the ambulance with former Special Forces guys and combat medics. And but one of the teams, they called us, and they said, who is this Irina Skaya? And is she a Russian honeypot? She had reached out to them and said, hey, look, we bought you an ambulance, and we know you're going. And I said, you can Google her. She's a comedian, and she's a Ukrainian patriot.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Hope for Ukraine. Go to thegreatcampaign.org to check out more information about his incredible work of he and the team, of course, rescuing not only Afghanis still, but Ukrainians as well. Good morning to you. Welcome back to our show, Jason.
It's great to be on your show and with all these wonderful Catholics and others driving to work.
Praise be to God.
You are Catholic, you're listening in. You want to know about our faith, and I love talking to them too.
I don't know. The gas prices are what they are. We may not be driving anymore. We may just be the great walk to work. It could become Catholic walk time pretty soon. How are you guys getting gas? Is the gas supply in Ukraine for your buses still good? I mean, do you guys still have supplies there?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, I saw a friend of mine posted on social media yesterday. They were asked if they wanted a receipt after filling their tank, and she said, I just told them, no, keep the receipt. I want to forget this entire experience. The gas is very expensive. So we're spending a lot of money on gas. In Afghanistan, we had our Coal for Christmas campaign, because people were freezing to death because of the cold weather. So we were buying coal and distributing coal across Afghanistan all winter long with food. And now we're buying buses and ambulances in Poland, and we're spending a lot of money on gasoline. It's very expensive, but if you go to thegreatcampaign.org, you donate $100, that will cover all the costs to rescue one young woman, one child. but it's very expensive. Like we bought an ambulance 2 days ago in Poland for $4,900. But it won't take long for us to spend more money in gasoline for that ambulance than the ambulance itself cost us. The gas is very expensive.
Wow, that's unreal. Jason, I'm wondering if you could maybe fill us in on what does the operation look like on a typical day? This is anything but typical, but what do you have to do to make this happen, to get these wheels on the ground here?
Well, we have these teams. So we have our 2 country teams, Hope for Afghanistan and Hope for Ukraine. And then we have our ground teams, our folks working in those countries, rescuing and evacuating people. And in both countries, we are distributing you can't take everyone out. So we're bringing people the necessities of life, the medical supplies in each country. A big part of what I have to do is fundraise. I've never had to fundraise so hard in my life. Traditionally what we do is we run influence campaigns. I make movies. I ghostwrite op-eds for senators or movie stars. And, we run influence campaigns. But because of our work, especially in the Muslim world, we're outspoken advocates for the Uyghur, and I was very active in Iraq. And so we got inundated with requests to evacuate folks. We had to learn this. There was no organization that existed to do the types of work we needed to do in Afghanistan, and now we have to do it in Ukraine. So we've had to learn how we go. You asked a question before the break, what happens once you get them to Poland or out of Ukraine? And that's something we didn't think about in Afghanistan at first. Our goal was just get them to Pakistan, get them across the border, get them on a plane to UAE. I didn't think about then what. We just were racing to get people out of the country as the Taliban was chasing us down. But then we had to discover now we need to pay for safe houses in Pakistan because Pakistan's not much safer than Afghanistan. And then now we have to get law firms on to help us resettle these people permanently in a safe country. Then we have to work with the U.S. government, or we're working with the government of Brazil or Ecuador or other countries. So, it's a big process, and we have an 11-step process from their first contact with us to them being permanently resettled. And, the first step, when you're in the Army and you come across a soldier that was shot or wounded, the first thing you're trained to say to them is you're going to be okay. So our first step when they reach out to us through LinkedIn or WhatsApp or Instagram, a young man saw me on EWTN News Nightly, who was an American citizen trapped in Afghanistan, and reached out to me, and we eventually rescued him, and now he's in San Diego leading our efforts to rescue Afghans.
Wow, praise God.
When he first reached out to me, my first words to him were, his name is Prince Wafa. I said, Prince Wafa, you're going to be okay. We're going to be with you till you're safe. That's the first step, those words, and we mean that. We are with them. We are with them as we move them to Pakistan. We are with them as we work to permanently resettle them in a new country. We are with them as it's hard to resettle in a new country, in a new culture, in another part of the world when you're dealing with PTSD and the sorrow and the survivor's guilt, all of these things. And I learned a lot of this with our work over a decade ago in Sudan. We worked with the Lost Boys and others, and we thought, hey, we brought you to America, things are going to be okay. And then we looked back and we found so many of them were committing suicide. Why? Because they had survivor's guilt. They were heartbroken. They couldn't adjust to this new culture. And so we really have, especially as Catholics, right? And I had the privilege of speaking at a Hazara mosque 2 days ago. The Hazara are a minority community in Afghanistan. They're Shia, and I spoke in the mosque, and I said, as a Catholic, we're taught that we're not to serve the princes and, the princes of this world, but the kings and queens of God, the spiritual kings and queens, God's kings and queens. And who are those kings and queens that I'm to serve? It's the widow, it's the orphan, it's the refugee. And I tell my team that we're the concierge desk at the Ritz-Carlton. This might sound strange, but this is what I tell my team. We're the concierge desk at the Ritz-Carlton. And when an Afghan or someone from Ukraine reaches out to us and says, help rescue us, help deliver us food, we should respond to them within seconds. And we should meet all of their needs. And so now in Afghanistan, we can deliver food to most places in that country when someone reaches out to us. Oftentimes they're starving to death. They've been hiding in an attic like Anne Frank. and somehow a friend or a family member of theirs hears about us and they reach out to us for food, we can usually deliver food and coal to them within 4 hours. Some places it takes us 24 because we're putting food on donkeys. But, if they're in Kabul or something like that and hiding, we can usually get food. And once we vet them, once we make sure they are who they say they are, because the Taliban lays traps for our teams, once we can vet who they are, usually within 4 hours of first contact, it takes about 4 hours for us to do all of our processes in Kabul. My team delivers the food and coal. Usually we deliver an entire season's worth of food in the first delivery. And then my team takes a picture of it and they send it to me. My wife calls me the Jeff Bezos of Afghanistan.
You have a space outfit as well. You have a rocket going into space too. You need one if you're going to be the Jeff Bezos.
Being the Jeff Bezos of Afghanistan doesn't pay as well as being Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think it's the treasures in heaven. And I tell you what, there was a pregnancy center in Austin that reached out to me. A young Afghan couple, a woman this is horrible, she had a problem pregnancy. So she was kicked out of, they literally asked her and her husband to leave the refugee camp here in the United States. And they said, we can't take care of you. You're too sick. Go figure it out on your own. And they released her out of the camp.
Wow.
She goes to a crisis pregnancy center staffed by good pro-life Christians. And they knew of my work from TV. And they called me. I immediately jumped in my car because I live in the hill country of Texas, and I drove to Austin. This young couple, and they look like movie stars. This young couple, they were separated from their 1-year-old son and the grandma when the bomb blast happened at Abbey Gate.
Oh no!
And MPs pulled the mom and dad one way, and baby and grandma were pushed in the other way.
Oh.
And they were literally just put onto planes and flew away from their baby. Like, you can't even imagine. So when I met with this young couple, the grandmother and the baby, who was just 1 year old, were starving to death and freezing to death. While I was with this couple and this pregnancy center director at a restaurant in Austin, in this beautiful part of town, and I'm with this couple that's going under the most sorrowful experience you could imagine. By God's grace, our team was able to deliver 4 months of food, coal, baby formula, diapers, baby wipes, right there in Afghanistan. Our team got it to them in Kabul, and we gave the grandma what would be the equivalent of a year's salary for a school teacher in Kabul. And we've been caring for them now, and we're working with Red Cross. In the next week or two, the very next flight out of Kabul, the baby and the baby's aunt will be flying to Austin, Texas, where that couple will be reunited.
Praise be to God.
That God uses us, and it's thanks to our donors. My nonprofit was usually founded around, we make movies, the movies make money, the money does our pro-life and whole life apostolate. We didn't really have to lean on donors other than our major donors that helped us with movies. But we didn't really reach out to smaller donors, and we didn't really need donors. But in the past, since this Afghanistan catastrophe, we've really reached out to people who follow our work, my work, and they've been so generous. We've never had to turn down a request for help, a request for evacuation.
Praise be to God.
And we've been down to $20, $30 in the bank, and then all of a sudden, I always tell my team, we're going to drive till we hit E, and then we'll walk to the gas station. And but by God's grace, we have been able to meet every request for help.
Well, we're just down to it now. We're almost out of time with Jason Jones. I want to encourage you, dear listener, to check out thegreatcampaign.org, thegreatcampaign.org, and you'll see that donate button in the top right corner there. Seems like a fantastic way to support and do something when we're stuck here in the States, not driving our cars because of $8 gallon gas, but we could support your efforts, Jason. Really, hats off to you, my brother. God love you. God bless you. Thank you for all your heroic witness and for your team. I mean, these silent heroes, truly silent heroes. We don't even know who they are, but they're out there doing the business right now.
Yeah, they're the real heroes. The Catholic News Agency is there'll be an article that drops today where they really highlight the work of our team in the Ukraine, and you'll see they're a very beautiful, unique group of people. A famous yachtsman, a stand-up comedian, a really unlikely group of heroes. You'd meet them in Rick's Cafe in Casablanca type of folks.
Wow, praise be to God. What an eclectic group of incredible people. God love you, Jason Jones. Thank you for your time today. We're very grateful to you.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
All right. Go to thegreatcampaign.org for more information. So much we could have gotten into, but what a great conversation, Jason Jones. That's going to do it for hour number 1 of Catholic Drive Time.